So, so when we think about, just like I talked about earlier, when we think about climate policies, we're thinking things like Paris Agreement, Kyoto Protocol, but not everyone really understands them. And it's known that from the beginning of time, the things we now know as climate change had attention, but it all started back in 1896 when a Swedish scientist, whose name I can't pronounce, uh, basically published a paper and told the world that if we continue to ban fossil fuels, there will be a very big increase in CO2, and eventually it will lead to global warming. Sorry. And of course, the world did not listen to him. So time goes by, and now we are looking at the 1930s when measurements are now showing that temperatures have increased in the US and the Northern Atlantic. And very many people are asking themselves, what is the cause of this temperature? Not remembering that, of course, they had ignored the warnings of the Swedish scientists. So another scientist now also publishes a paper saying that beautiful. The reason why temperatures are increasing like this is because climate change is actually happening. And this scientist was known as Guy Stewart. But still, of course, they did not give attention to his research. But good thing Guy Stewart did not give up. He went on researching, and eventually today we know him as one of the significant figures when it comes to climate change. And then fast forward to the 1980s when one Dr. James gives a testimony to in the US, telling them about how climate change is real, and he had a lot of evidence to back up this testimony. So that was the first notable level of attention given to climate change. And it's a good thing that they listened because in that same year, we had the UN establish the IPCC. Many of us have heard of IPCC, but we may not even know what IPCC in full is. So IPCC in full is Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and 195 countries signed this IPCC report. So the advantage of the IPCC report is that government now had one source of sure information that they can read about climate change instead of scientists. A discovered this, scientist B discovered this, but rather everything was collected and put into one report. So think about IPCC as a verified account on Instagram or Twitter of a celebrity or even an activist. Because if, for example, Goodness has an account and he's a celebrity activist and he's publishing information related to climate, but then there are other accounts, all the information that will be taken will be the one from the verified account. So think about IPCC as a verified account on social media. So now fast forward to 1992, the Rio Earth Summit. This was on Earth Day in June. So now, I don't know if anyone has a report, a question up to this point. Please just put it in the chat. And Goodness or Joshua, please bring it to my attention. Thank you. Okay, so now at the Rio Summit in 1992, that's when we had the UNFCCC signed. Many of us have heard of the UNFCCC, but we don't actually know when it started or when it was signed. So this is an opportunity to learn more about the UNFCCC. So in 1992, we had the UNFCCC signed. The UNFCCC is United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, but it was ratified 3 years later in 1994. What ratified means is basically the countries that have signed it to acknowledge that they're actually going to do what they signed up for. Now, the ratified process is basically these countries coming together, they sign this document, then they go back to their countries, and then the major governmental bodies like the judiciary, the government, the parliament approve this document and don't actually say, yes, we're going to participate and fulfill our commitments that we have signed. But that took 3 years for every country to sign. So to run you through this convention, it had goals. So basically, in the one of the goals for this UNFCCC was that countries had to acknowledge that climate change is a problem, and then countries had to consider to minimize their greenhouse gas emission concentrations at a safe level. Those were the two goals of the UNFCCC, that convention. Then the countries that were under obligation, by then it was the developed or the industrialized countries, and they're the ones that had to take action. And then the less developed or the developing countries just had an option, like it was voluntary for them to, participate in this process, in taking action. But then you might ask yourself, why is it like that's not fair? Why is it that some countries had to had to be had to take action and the others had it was voluntary? Well, back then in 1992, the global greenhouse emissions were 62%, and they were by 38 developed or industrialized countries by then. But the developing countries, oh, I made a mistake on this. So this 38%, there were 150 developing countries, not 38. Sorry about that. So that's why they had to be the developed countries had to be the ones to take action. And then the developed countries also had resources in place. When you talk about resources, you're thinking technological, human resources, and even the financial resources to actually take action for their part in climate change. Then when it came to the financing bit of it under UNFCCC, it was suggested that they should establish some sort of financial mechanism to support developing countries in their fight to reduce greenhouse gas emission concentration in the effects of climate change that they were already suffering from by then in 1992. Therefore, they decided that let's launch a system of grants, loans for adaptation and for mitigation efforts in these developing countries. And this fund was supposed to be filled again, like every 4 years. That's when these donor countries or the developed countries had to fill this fund again every 4 years. And then when you look at the implementation aspect, the developed countries had to do annual reporting on their greenhouse gas emissions. And then legally binding, no. This this UNFCCC convention, it wasn't legally binding. That meant that the developed countries, either they would deliver or not deliver. Like there was no law that was going to say you signed and you didn't deliver. So they just had a choice. So this convention had its flaws, but it was definitely a big step towards action. Yeah. Joshua or different. Are there any questions? Okay, thank you. So now let's look at the Kyoto Protocol. So 5 years later, after the Rio Summit, in 1997, that's when countries signed the first extension of the Rio Summit. So don't look at the Rio Summit as an independent kind of summit on its own that had its climate policies, but look at it like every other summit that you've held, look at it as an extension of the previous one. So now the Kyoto Protocol was an extension of the Rio Summit. This Kyoto Protocol, it was more concrete, it had more numeric goals, and it had phases. Now, look at the Kyoto Protocol being signed in 1997, but ratified by countries in 2005. That took 7 years, meaning that by the time they even ratified it, all these figures like reduce your emissions yesterday by 5% versus 1990s, all these emissions, they were now outdated, all the information from 1997, because emissions had gone on increasing. So it had two phases from 2008, 2012, then from 2013 to 2020. And in the first phase, that's where they talked about 5% emissions, but in the second phase, they became more aggressive with an 18%, like reduce your greenhouse gas emissions by 18%. When you're looking at the goals of the Kyoto Protocol. Sorry. The goals, countries had to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions by 5%, but I had talked about that in the phases. Then countries under obligation, it's still the same as the convention for UNFCCC at the Rio Summit. Then when it came to financing, it was also similar to that of UNFCCC. But many people look at the Kyoto Protocol as something that wasn't very successful because developed countries like the US that were responsible for 25% of global greenhouse gas emissions by then didn't join. And that meant that even if other people, like other countries that already developed this action, the greenhouse gas emissions would not go down as like the goal set. Yeah. Then when we look at the implementation aspects of things for the Kyoto Protocol, actually that was a pretty interesting. The Kyoto Protocol had a pretty interesting implementation aspect, which I want to go into briefly. So there had to be emissions monitoring for the countries. Then they introduced a compliance system, and then they also introduced market mechanisms. So that's the market mechanisms are the ones that I want to go through. So you might be wondering, what are market mechanisms and how do they work? So basically, a country set a limit on greenhouse emissions, and then after they have set that goal, when they hit their target, they have rights to emit, and like they get a value, like their right to emit are valuable, and they can sell or buy, they can be sold and bought. I don't know if that makes sense. Okay. Uh, if it's okay, please put a thumbs up so I can repeat it again. All right. If it's okay, we can move on. So there are types of, okay, thank you. There are types of the market mechanisms, and the first one is the international emission trading. So this one applies only to developed countries. So think of country A and then think of country B. Now this whole bar is the amount of emissions for country A, and this whole bar is the amount of emissions for country B. Now they have to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions up to the blue arrow, but then they don't go down up to the blue arrow, and unfortunately they go down up to the green arrow. Then look at country B. They also had the same target to reduce their emissions up to arrow B. Sorry, up to arrow, the blue arrow. But then they reduce lower up to this green arrow here where you see the blue line, meaning that they have spare units of emission, and these spare units have a value. So country B can choose to sell them to country A, and then country A, like it will be counted as country A makes their emission to close up this gap. Country A makes their emission goal. Yeah, that's international emission trading. Then we have two, which is the clean development mechanism. This one applies to both developed and developing countries, and in my opinion, it has its flaws, but in my opinion, I think it's the best way because now the developed countries say have a target, and then they don't hit their target to reduce the emissions. What they do, they find a developed country and then carry out clean energy projects like building a wind farm, installing things like solar panels to cover, and then like that would be counted as their emissions have been made. Yes, it's a little bit unrealistic because this is just figurative or it's just in one, but it hasn't actually been proved that when they build these wind farms or when they install solar panels, it will cover up for all their emissions that they have met. Then we have joint the joint implementation is similar to the clean development mechanism, but this type is they are done in developing countries, meaning it's the developed countries that have to come up with clean energy projects. Yeah. So in an overview of the Kyoto Protocol, the Kyoto Protocol was legally binding. This is why many countries like the US did not want to sign it, because there are figures that you have to reduce by this given percent of our emissions, and it's legally binding. So countries like the US, which are one of the big emitters, did not want to sign. So despite all the shortcomings of the Kyoto Protocol, it was a huge step forward in the field of international cooperation to combat climate change. Okay, I've been given a warning, so let me just run through the Paris Agreement. The Paris Agreement was signed in 2015 and then ratified in 2016. So, but actual action, started in 2020 with a review expected to happen every 5 years. Of course, the US still backed out in the Paris Agreement. Some of the goals of the Paris Agreement, we should not allow the global temperatures to go beyond 2 degrees Celsius, but they even made it more ambitious and said, let's not go beyond 1.5 degrees Celsius and achieve net zero by 2050. And then in the Paris Agreement, things changed when it came to parties under obligation. All parties were under obligation to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, but the commitment varied, of course, because not everyone has a very big emission. Then financing is still the same mechanism, but now there is a numeric goal with $100 billion to be put forward every year. Then when it comes to implementation, there was also a change with flexibility and national ownership. Now, countries had to set their own targets consistent with the resources that they actually have. So the processes that have had to be followed have to be transparent in planning, in implementation, and in review. So you may be thinking that what if a country says that our emissions are only 15% and yet they are 20 or more? But I recommend that you read something called the Paris Rulebook so that you know the guidelines that these countries have to follow when they're talking about their emissions or exporting their emissions. Then there was a hybrid when it came to is it legally binding? It's a hybrid kind of situation. So legally binding in a way that if you establish emission tracking systems and conduct regular reporting, but you don't actually have to deliver on these reports. And then also you don't have to comply with your targets. Say you have say that your emissions are 15% and you say we're going to reduce by 5%, there's no law that ties you to that commitment. Yeah. So that's the overview of the 3 main climate policies. Then I would recommend that since this year Adaptaion coalition is focusing on adaptation finance, you go and on your own time to read through these climate policies that I've gone through and see where adaptation finance comes in and like when did it first appear in the UNFCCC process? What is it set in a country, in a continent? What is it set in a continent like Africa? And is it even relevant and important in Africa? Should we be focusing on maybe another set of finance? Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aida, for that good presentation. And everyone, I think you've had something to learn. Goodness, do we have any questions from people? If you could clarify that, please.
I've not seen any question yet, so maybe we can ask the audience if they have any question.
Okay, are there any questions to be put in the chat? We can take on 4 questions. And for now, as you're waiting for questions, I request you to to open your cameras, to let them open, and we take a picture. Then we can take them off. Please smile for the photo. Okay, I'm waiting for some more. Okay, now I think we can take the photo.
Wait.
What can we say to smile? Who can suggest something we can say?
Adaptation finance.
Adaptation finance. 1, 2, 3, go. Adaptation finance.
Adaptation finance.
Yeah, let me check the photo. Okay, goodness, are there any questions in the chat?
Not yet. So if someone have a question, maybe they can raise their hands, then we ask them to proceed.
Later. Okay, now since there's no question yet, I can see our next speaker is Nicholas Okoit. He'll be telling us about how, okay, based on what Ida shared, he'll be adding on how these policies, with some policies we're advocating for and some policies we're advocating against. How do these policies come into place? Are they influenced so much by the global south or the global north? And what can we do in our respective organization to work towards implementing of these policies, or what contribution do we have in our respective countries to work toward these climate policies? Nicholas, you're welcome.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Nicholas Omnuk. I'm climate activist from Uganda, and I'm going to talk about how these policies are implemented, and also talk about what we can do to make sure that these policies are implemented. And just in a few minutes, I'm going to turn off my video and then share my screen, and then we shall go through my presentation, and later on, maybe in case you have any questions, you can ask. Yeah. Can you see my screen?
We can see the screen.
Yeah, so basically, a policy for a policy to be implemented, it has to pass through a policy cycle. And as Ida had talked about, the Kyoto Protocol and the Paris Agreement, all these are like policies, and all these followed this same cycle that we're seeing here. And the first step is policy development. And in policy development, different stakeholders come together. For example, the global north countries come together, and then they discuss about what policies are there to implement this. But before them discussing about this, they have to first identify a problem. And this is the problem that makes them meet and discuss about this problem. And they develop laws and also develop mechanisms that can be used in order to achieve certain goals. So under policy development, they talk about the different laws and different mechanisms that can be adopted to achieve a certain goal. And in the climate space, the goal is to achieve at least net zero emissions by 2050, and also to keep temperatures below 1.5 degrees, and if to the maximum below 2 degrees Celsius. So so to keep those temperatures below that, all these countries came together and discussed about the different mechanisms on how they can keep the temperatures below 1.5 degrees and also keep the temperatures below 2 degrees so that they can achieve these goals. So after them developing the policy or the policy framework that is going to be followed, they ahead. I say, if they implement the policy, they have to review it. Implementing a policy basically means evaluating the effectiveness specific policy. And one of every climate conferences after a certain period of time, so that they're able to review and evaluate the different actions that they have been doing in order to keep these temperatures, or in order to achieve the climate goals. So I think that's all I had about policies and implementation. So I'm going to talk about the national adaptation plans. And these were established, formulate and implement at COP16. They established processes, and these processes were to help in achieving in helping the developing countries to also adapt to the impacts of climate change, and also help them to achieve the climate goals, because developing countries are usually behind schedule on several climate goals, because they do not have the capacity to handle such things or such events like immediately, due to so many reasons like financial shortages and all that. So at COP16, they established the national adaptation plans to enable parties formulate and implement these, with a view of identifying medium and long-term adaptation needs, and developing and implementing strategies and programs to address these needs. And they invited developing country parties to employ the modalities formulated to support the NAPs, or the National Adaptation Plans. And this is like a map of the different countries that attended this COP16 and also developed adaptation plans. And the darker shades, for example, these are countries with national adaptation plans. So this is one of the developing countries with national adaptation plans. Then we also have South Sudan, North Sudan, and then we have Kenya, and we have another country here, Ethiopia in Africa. So these are some of the developing countries that are not the adaptations that were created during the climate frameworks that were there before creating. Before all this. So the ones that are lighter, the lighter shades, are those that started the process of creating a national adaptation plan. And one of the countries that are a bit lighter, I think you can see there are some countries here in West Africa, there are some countries in East Africa, there's Congo here, there's South Africa, and then there are those without any national adaptation plans. And these are the ones that have no information or anything related to that. And we have some countries here in Africa, then we also have here some countries. So all this, you can find it on you can find it on the internet. Everything that I'm talking about can be found on the internet, and I'm just going to show you. Yes, can you all see this?
Yes, we can see this.
Yeah, this is like this is all this information is on the UNFCCC website, and you can see here that on this part of national adaptation plans, it's under the topic of adaptation and resilience. So under the topic of adaptation and resilience, you can always find information on these adaptation plans. And then you can always find more resources here, like the LDC main page, then the NAP Central. NAP Central is like the National Adaptation Plans, a main central portal where they always publish information about this. And this is like the NAP Central website. So like you can always find information from these submitted national adaptation plans, sectoral national adaptation plans, national adaptation guidelines, national adaptation events. So it contains every information regarding adaptation currently. Basing on to talk about the topic of adaptation. And you can also find this document of updated national adaptation plans, and these talk about all the different least developing countries that have submitted their plans, and you can always check out every region, and you can see there is Bangladesh here, there is Nepal, there is Rwanda, and other countries that have also been able to submit their national adaptation plans. And then you can also find, like, all these links can be interconnected, and this is the LDC portal, the one that I talked about here. I think LDC main page, yeah, that's the LDC main page. And the LDC main page, you can always find how how the least developing countries are working with different experts in within their countries to always like achieve the goal on adaptation and resilience. And it talks more about Article 4.9 of the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement. Then there's always a meeting on adaptation by the least developing countries. And this is like the leg meeting. Leg
So I thank you so much because I've learned a lot. I've learned something about the policy cycle, the NAPs, and these things are that made more sense to me when you presented them. Previously, when we asked for a question, I think a question came through for Ida. And all the questions you have for Nicholas, please send them in the chat. And after Ida answers that question, I'll also share some few concepts that would be good for us to know from today's call. Ida, you can answer that question.
I don't know what the question is. Could you tell me the question first, please?
Okay.
So, yeah, Goodness, you can share it.
Yes. So the question comes from Joseph Danladi. He's asking, is Paris Agreement different from the Kyoto Protocol?
Thank you, Goodness. I think he was not present when I started the presentation, but the two are definitely very different, but also very similar. They are different in a way that they are in different years, and many things around implementation, financing are different, but also they are similar in a way because that they are climate policies. And also the Kyoto Protocol was before the Paris Agreement. I hope that answers.
Well,
Sorry, I think people said they can't hear me, but I was can you hear me now? I think it was Joy and Evelyn. Okay. Sorry. So I was just basically answering the question that Joseph about the like telling him that Paris Agreement and Kyoto Protocol are different but also similar. Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. So Goodness, you'll help me take note if there are some questions for Nicholas as I share these few concepts. So from the lessons we have heard today, I think they are so insightful, and we had planned for the training to be short so that you can have time to do other things. But there are some concepts I believe you're going to be hearing more often as we're going through this year, and they'll be important for you and or to read further about. I'll just share something small about it. Global stocktake. This is a concept that you're going to hear so much, and even part of it will be happening in the Africa Climate Week in Kenya. But global stocktake means the talks and reviews of what has been done and what has not been done by countries to achieve their goals of the Paris Agreement. From the presentation about the Paris Agreement, you listen that each country's plan to do some things to cut down their emissions and to work towards achieving 1.5. So a global stocktake is to review what a country has done and what a country has not done. Whenever you hear global stocktake, I think it will be making sense to you. And you can read more about it. In adaptation finance, you can read widely about it, but simply it's a finance for actions that help countries to reduce the risk they face, harm that they might suffer from climate change. And then loss and damage, it's a fund that was agreed to help vulnerable countries rebuild from what has been lost due to the results of climate change. Mitigation could refer to the efforts to reduce or prevent emissions or greenhouse gases from different countries. Then adaptation, it's a process of adjusting to the effects of climate change. And this is why it's where adaptation is like a process of adjusting to the effects of climate change. So adaptation finance helps us in evolving. For example, if an area is prone to floods, adaptation finance can help the community to build systems which avert water from them, and maybe water is taken into a better place. Yeah, so thank you very much. Then something else Nicholas shared, the policy cycle. I think it's very important for us to understand the policy cycle so much. Mostly people here who own NGOs, because each NGO, I'm sure there's a certain policy you're working towards, maybe feminism, maybe food, or some that policy, how it is international. You can even which does these policies and what are they working on this year. From that, you can easily know where will finance be moving this year in line with this, in line with my NGO. I can help you develop proposals which are in line with the funding of that year. Yeah, thank you very much. Goodness, are there any questions?
Someone is saying that we should have the keywords in the chat box so that they can go through them. That is the one you shared just now. Then there is a question also. If I may, are there any policies or mechanisms to ensure effective management of resources and curtail vices such as embezzlement? That is for Nicholas. Nicholas.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for that question. So what I can say is that yes, they are looking into they are putting that into consideration. For example, in the loss damage fund, the discussions have, and one of the reasons as to why they have delayed is because they want to find a way, a transparent way in which the finances are going to reach the exact people who are affected. And one of the discussions that have been ongoing is they were trying to come up with ideas of which financial institutions should hold the money, and which organs or groups should be in charge of using humanitarian groups like the Red Cross, or using NGOs that have been really working hard. Like, for example, the UN has been helping to fight refugees and all that. So they were trying to discuss on how they can do this in such a way that the money is going to reach the exact people, because they are aware of the corrupt systems, especially in the different developing countries. So they're always putting this into consideration, and I think the Santiago network is currently working on that, and this is one of the things that has really made the discussions delay so much. And even at the end of progress on the loss and damage fund, and so many people. So I think they are also looking into that and also putting it into consideration. And yeah, I hope this has answered your question. Yeah.
Goodness, is there any?
So
Okay, so
I think for now that is the questions. But if anyone have any question, you can kindly raise up your hand or indicate, then we allow you speak.
as we are waiting for questions, I just wanted to tell you that a recording of the training will be shared, and also the different notes and further reading materials will be shared to people. We shall get a mechanism there. We can share this content to each and every one. Be rest assured you will get all this content to help you to understand more, to guide you in your further study, and to enlighten you more in this field of climate activism. Thank you.
Okay, so while we are still waiting for questions, one more time, we would like everyone to turn on their camera so they can take photo, because this event is being recorded. And please, will give us some time to turn on our cameras. Yes, we still have others. We'll see again. Yeah, so I'll be doing that now at the count of 3. Okay, so, oh, sorry. So 1, 2, and 3. Okay, please hold on. Let me take others too. So for the last time, one, 2, and 3. Okay, that is all. Thank you so much. Over to you, Joshua.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much, everyone. I think we have come to the end of the call. Since there is no any other question, I see there's no any other question. We can all switch on our cameras and say bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Bye.
everyone. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.